Welcome to Talent Strategy 60. I am your friendly neighborhood talent strategy nerd, Dr. Jim, and we are here with another fantastic panel discussion. The topic for today is going to be sales leadership's role in overcoming the status quo. Our mission as a panel is to empower talent leaders of all functions to be able to do more with less by leveraging the power of collective intelligence. And let me tell you, we have some brain power and horsepower on this panel today. So let's get right to it and introduce our fantastic panelists. First off, Wesleyne, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Dr. Jim. My name is Wesleyne. I am in Houston, Texas. I am the CEO and founder of Transform Sales, where we focus on developing leaders so that we can ensure that every person on the team becomes a sales superstar where they're hitting their quota each and every month. And a fun fact about me is I am a recovering chemist and I transitioned into sales and sales leadership. And today is actually a really special day for me because my podcast is 2 years old today, the Transform Sales podcast. So.
That is awesome stuff, Wesleyne. And for those who don't know and are joining us on either YouTube or LinkedIn on the stream, Wesleyne's like the Beyonce of sales. So that's why she only has one name. So I just want to throw that out there. And I've dubbed that. We came up with that on a former podcast that we did together. So I want to make sure that everybody is aware of that. One thing that you mentioned that's really interesting, Wesleyne, and I think the audience would find it pretty interesting, is your transition from technical scientific sales into sort of the sales and coaching component. And the reason why it's interesting to me, there are very few women in sales. There's very few women in sales leadership. There's even fewer women in technical scientific sales leadership. So you're like a unicorn on top of a unicorn wrapped around, I don't know, a Pegasus or something. So tell us that story a little bit.
So I was a chemist. I worked in the lab and I was like, I need more. I need to talk to people. I need more human interaction. And so I transitioned and I went all the way up into being an international sales manager of a chemical company. And what I realized was in the first 6 months of me being a sales manager that I was horrible and people were leaving because of me. And so I really figured out that in order to lead a better team, I had to fix myself. And so that's really what we focused on. We focused on tapping into that inner being, the core of the sales leader, so that they can deal with the yucky from really achieving their ultimate goals and then flow that into developing their team.
Awesome stuff, Wesleyne. I can't wait to dig into your insights in the course of this conversation. And if you haven't figured out already, for those of you who are joining us on the stream, I'm highly likely to be fanboying throughout various parts of this conversation because these are three of my favorite people that are on the show. So we are going to hit it hard, and don't be surprised if I squee at least once or twice. Next up, I want to bring in Jen. Jen, welcome to the show. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and the background and all the great stuff that you've been up to.
First of all, Dr. Jim, if you ever make me go after Wesleyne again, we're done. Like the Beyonce of sales, the unicorn wrapped in a unicorn. Like, I don't know how I'm supposed to follow that. I don't know, but I'll do my best. So my name's Jen Allen. I actually just recently left my job. So I'm unemployed right now. For the last 18 years, I've been an individual contributor sales rep carrying like a multi-million-dollar quota. This is the first December in 18 freaking years that I don't have a quota hanging over my head. And man, it feels so good. It feels so good. So I spent that entire time at an organization called CEB, or Corporate Executive Board, and then Challenger. And so a lot of my, the time that I've spent either hosting the Winning the Challenger Sale podcast or selling has been transformed by what I learned from Challenger. So the reason I get up every day and sit here and do these things is because I truly believe, very similar, Wesleyne, to you, that there's so much to learn in sales. It's not a job where you ever stop learning, and the environment around us keeps shifting. So I left Challenger on Friday, and I am going to be doing more keynotes and team calls and things like that to really try to empower sales reps to understand that they themselves are the best possible answer to what's happening out here in the market. So that's me.
So great stuff, Jen, and I appreciate you sharing that. I am going to call out a couple of things. So I think you undersold the challenger bit. I am a huge challenger advocate and practitioner for a while. So I think there's something there in terms of your ability and staying power and knowledge that you've just dropped. And for those that are joining us on the stream or watching us on YouTube, if you haven't checked out the Challenger Sale podcast that Jen was on, that's actually how I discovered Jen, or not how I didn't discover Jen. That's how I figured out who Jen was. That show is killer. It is so actionable. I would recommend everybody to go check it out. And more importantly, you're now a co-founder. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, clearly this is like my first show I'm doing since I quit my job. I'm like, how do I introduce myself anymore? So I'm also a co-founder along with Will Aitken and Nick Capozzi of a community called Social Social. And so the whole idea with Social Social was we were all evangelists for our companies. And evangelism is this weird, goofy term that isn't mainstream yet. And so we would meet once a month and say, hey, how are you measuring your performance? Hey, who are you reporting into? Do you have a team? What technology are you using? And all of a sudden we kind of realized we're absolutely not the only people to have these questions. So we built this community. We launched it 3 weeks ago. And every Friday, we just got off one, we do a meetup and we take topics that are really hard. Like, how do you measure dark social activity? What kind of equipment do you use? Like big, small, all these different meaty topics. And we have a Slack channel where we connect people to kind of provide answers. So it's been a kind of little labor of fun and love. And it's just been a great opportunity to meet other people who are doing similar things.
Awesome stuff. And if you aren't in social, ping Jen or I. We will send you the particulars, but especially for those who are building sort of their social presence and building their brands, there is so much thought leadership in there that you're constantly learning. And I think everybody is aware of the power of community in terms of being able to advance your objectives faster than just kind of muddling through on your own. So definitely leverage that. Last but certainly not least, Nick Reed Smith, the funniest sales guy that I know of, joins us on the show. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and all the stuff that you're doing.
Thanks, Dr. Jim. Well, I'm going to repeat a line from Jen. I don't know how the heck I follow Wesleyne and Jen. This is like, I think you did this in reverse order on purpose, Dr. Jim. So, yeah, I'm just a guy who really enjoys selling, and I'm super pumped to be here. And I've got massive imposter syndrome right now.
All right. Well, let's sort that out real quick. So I'm going to get rid of that for you. You have one of the most interesting TikTok presence that I have in my network. You have one of the most active networks on LinkedIn that I've seen. You're one of the funniest people in sales, for whatever that's worth, and you're a best-selling author. So you can drop the mic and just what he said, but tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, Dr. Jim, I should hire you to just walk around and be my hype person all the time, because that was pretty sweet. I guess it really boils down to just do what you love. I didn't find sales until later in my career, and I have a thing against people saying find your passion. I think what you do is you find something that you reasonably like, you dive in with 2 feet, you commit, and then you build the passion. And that's what I've done with sales. And so now I work a lot, and it just feels like fun. I don't feel like I'm working. So it makes it easy to go do those things and put yourself out there.
That's brilliantly put, Nick. And before we move into the meat of the discussion, or at least set the stage before we dive into the discussion, tell us a little bit about your book.
Yeah. So it was a multi-author book. And I think we're all big networkers here. It was called Sales Fusion. And so what we did is we got a bunch of different people with different sales backgrounds, some as individual contributors, some as solopreneurs, some as enterprise sales reps, some with marketing bents, and all wrote a different chapter on a different topic. My particular chapter, I was talking about partnerships, ecosystems, strategic alliances. So it was really fun to put that out there. And the great thing when you have that many people contributing, you're leveraging everybody's audience, everybody's network. So it was easy to hit the bestseller list.
Awesome stuff. So I want to call out something that Nick mentioned in all seriousness. The order is just the order. It's not the order of importance. We are talking about a panel that is just rock solid heavy hitters when it comes to sales and sales process. So this is going to be a very meaningful conversation with everybody who is on the panel that has a unique insight that they're going to offer sales professionals that are catching this live or on demand in changing the landscape or changing their circumstances in 2023. That's the main purpose of the show. That's the reason why this is the last live Friday show of Talent Strategy 60. So let's get into it. So here's what the sales world and the selling world is facing right now. When you look at the landscape of sales at the end of 2022, almost 3/4 of sales reps will have missed quota. You're going to see opportunity win rates that are on average between 20 and 30% win rates. You're going to see a lot of churn that's happening within sales organizations, and that's going to accelerate given some of the macroeconomic conditions. And when you think about all of those factors, as well as some of the other factors that everybody is aware of, sales professionals are understandably anxious about what they're heading into when they look at 2023. So the question that I ask is that, does it have to be that way? And this is a rhetorical question. It doesn't have to be that way. We've kind of put ourselves in a position as sales professionals and leaders to kind of create these circumstances. And the purpose of this conversation is to shift the paradigm, shift what is normal in the conventional wisdom and do things differently so that we're getting higher win rates, so that we have more of our people achieving quota, more of our people excelling, more of our people developing within our organizations. And that's going to take a people and process perspective to get that done. So that is the context that we're going to have this conversation about, and I want to hand it off to the panel to get their reactions and responses to kind of the state of sales as we wind down 2023 or 2022. Sorry, leading off with Jen. How would you respond and react to some of the stuff that I just laid out?
Yeah. So if you look at the past few years, right, we've been living in a land of riches. Right? There's lots of cash. There's lots of companies hiring. There's lots of people buying. And it's funny when you're in sales as long as I am and as the folks on this panel are on, you start to realize it's just a pendulum swing, right? You just go from left to right. And it's just a matter of how long you sit there before you swing the other direction. And so in many ways, what we saw back in 08 for those of us that were selling is just reoccurring again. And what happens, unfortunately, is times like 08 are really formative, and we learn to adapt. And then once we learn to adapt, then all of a sudden things get easier. And what do we do as humans when things get easier? We go back to the easy way of solving it, right? And so when demand is really high, we as salespeople can afford to be order takers, right? And I'm not arguing with that. If you got the phone ringing off the hook and your email's blowing up and people want to buy from you, take those orders. But the problem is when that starts to dry up like it has, all of a sudden we're in a panic mode where we're looking around saying, is the earth on fire? Like, is there any way out of here? And we at times forget we've been here before. And so I'm a big proponent of saying, just because something worked really, really well 2 years ago does not mean we double down on that thing. We have to look at the environment we're in and say, what can we learn from history that teaches us how we show up today? And so status quo, no decision. Anybody that knows me knows that like I will talk about this until the day I die, because as a salesperson, it's the number one competitor I lost more deals to than anybody else. Point blank, no question, no contest. And so in the past few years, I think largely a lot of organizations have said, let's solve for any growth problem through hiring more people or buying more sales technology or throwing SDRs at the problem. And it worked. It did. But it's not working anymore. And I think the main thing that I think organizations need to look at is to say, look at the conversations you're having with your customers. There is no superhero cape. There is nothing that's coming in terms of technology to save the day here. You have to look at the words that are coming out of our mouth and say, are we creating a compelling story that is about the customer's business? Or are we out here just blasting all the reasons we think we're amazing? So obviously I got a lot of passion about this subject, but I'll stop there for a second.
No, that's great stuff. And just for the folks who are watching on the stream, I am not a bobblehead, so pay no attention to the amount of time my head is just bobbing back and forth with what is coming out of the mouths of all these great panelists. But I want to follow up with you, Jen, on something that you just mentioned, or actually. Let me pivot a little bit. I want to pass it to Nick and ask the follow-up question. Feel free to add anything to what Jen said, but one of the things that caught my attention was, what can we learn from history? That was the question that Jen posed. And I'm going to add another question to it and pose it to you, Nick. When we combine Jen's question with what are the things that we need to do to recession-proof our professional careers? What would your advice be as a seller?
I love this. Yeah, I think we can learn a lot from history. And this is actually a really exciting time in my mind. A lot of people are really afraid, but this is a great time to set yourself apart. This is a great time to learn. This is a great time to experiment. And guess what? Failure is inherent in any type of an innovative environment, in any type of a sales environment. And so the quickest way to double your success rate is to double your failure rate. So in terms of how you can recession proof your career, this is a time I would say to lean in, work on your personal brand, work on what's like one or two things that you do better than anybody else, and figure how you can really leverage those things and subordinate everything else. That's the advice that I would give.
Great stuff, Nick. And we have Danny Wareham, who just chimed in on chat that we really need to tune into the pain and identifying what the pain is on the customer side. And I know, Wesleyne, I'm going to hand it to you. That's a great point because you and I talk about that stuff all the time. So feel free to respond to the initial question or anything that's been said so far, or even Danny's point about being tuned in to the customer pain as a way that you move forward into a more successful selling motion.
Yeah, so as I was listening to Jen speak, she mentioned the crash, if you will, of 2008. And being in Houston, I remember 2014 when oil went into the toilet. And so being a salesperson that was based in this petrochemical area, and there was no money happening in oil. And that year I was still double digits over my quota because I took a step back and I realized, okay, oil is in the toilet, but you know what? All the byproducts of oil, their margins are really skinny right now. Like they're making a lot of money. So I went to all the other things that I had never thought of before. So I tapped into the parts of the market that was really making money. And as salespeople, when we're in this downturn, you do have to double down and you have to think about what are the true problems? What are the true pains? What are the true challenges that my customers or those people who I may not have ever looked at before, what are they doing, right? How can I tap into that area?
Oh, you're on mute, Dr. Jim.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
Oh, amateur hour over here. Sorry. I was so wrapped up into what you were saying, Wesleyne, that I was like, oh, I got to chime in. And then it might help taking myself off mute. But what I really like about what you just said, Wesleyne, is, and I'm paraphrasing in sort of my translation, is sellers need to be doing things that are putting them in a position to rise above the sea of sameness in order to move forward. Don't do what everybody else is doing. And you have a great story that hopefully we can weave in about that experience. When everybody else was smiling and dialing and just pushing volume, you had some really unique ways to go into the market that took you to the top of the leaderboard. So really quickly before we move to the next topic, share with the audience how you operationalize that for success, being different, being seen different, rising above the sea of sameness.
So because I had this technical background, all I knew was technical stuff. I didn't know how to sell when I first started in sales. And I was like, okay, educate them and they will come. So I decided to do something different. And literally, we still teach our clients to do the same thing today. And I call it the 3 pillars of prospecting. And so many people are just focused on the cold outreach or just social media, but educational events, stuff like we're doing here, right? Like, how can I get on a webinar? How can I have a lunch and learn? How can I go see my customer and teach them something, right? and doing things like networking. So not just staying, as you said, Dr. Jim, in that sea of sameness, doing what everyone else is doing, but going to your boss, presenting them a plan, saying, I know this is what you have required of me, but can you allow me 20% of my time to try something different and try something new? And when they start seeing your results, that's when they'll be like, okay, you got it. Go do whatever you need to do to hit that quota. I'm not going to be jamming down your throat with these KPIs and telling you to do this or this or that.
Awesome stuff, Wesleyne, and I really like your advocacy for experimentation, and it creates a great bridge. Oh, gee, shocker! A scientific sales professional with a chemistry background advocating for experimentation. That's the biggest duh in the history of the world. Sorry. So it provides a great bridge, and I want to hand it off to Nick. When you're looking at what Wesleyne just said, getting the freedom to try different stuff and experiment, and you tie it into the day in the life of what the average rep is dealing with. And I don't think a lot of people, or maybe even leadership, is tied into what is the day in the life of a typical rep look like in terms of the stress and pressure that they're dealing with. So tell us a little bit about that world, plus creating the space for trying different things and experimenting and the impact that it could have.
Absolutely. Well, in this environment, salespeople are going to be asked to do a lot more with a lot less. Efficiency is really important right now because funding is drying up. First of all, revenue doesn't grow linearly with sales hires anyway, which is a common misconception. But right now, we don't have that luxury of just going out and throwing money or bodies at the problem, right? There's hiring freezes going on. There's layoffs. There's people who are under scrutiny to hit quota. So we have to do more with less. So I would look at, all the variables in the sales velocity equation. Win rate. We need to have a higher win rate. We need to have more opportunities in the pipe. We need to have shorter sales cycles. We need to have all those different things. And there's certain things that we can do to run experiments on shortening those without having to completely alter everything that we're doing, right? So what's something that you could do that could help increase your win rate just 1 or 2%? What's something you could do to help reduce your sales cycle just a little bit? But when you add all those variables up over time, it can make a really big impact to your total revenue. And I love that experimentation model. Something else I would recommend is experiment with one variable at a time, because it can be really easy to change multiple things at once. And then you see something successful, but then you don't really know what it was that you changed that made the difference, right? And so play with one variable at a time, track the results, plan, do, study, act. And as you go through that process and iterate, that's how you get better over time.
Dude. So I don't know who to pick on for a response to that answer. That was absolutely gold. And you were totally being a ringer with us in the beginning of the show saying, I don't know what I'm doing here. So fantastic answer. And I'm going to throw it back to Wesleyne, because you just heard the Bloomberg report that Nick just tossed out there. What would you add? How would you modify and expand what Nick just said? Brilliant answer, Nick. And I can't wait to hear what Wesleyne, where Wesleyne takes this.
I just love that you said change one thing at a time, and it just made my whole scientist brain light up. I'm like, let's remember elementary school science projects, one variable changing at a time, right? And I'm going to bubble that up a little bit and talk, because what happens is when you're in a time of crisis, you're in that fight or flight, you're changing everything. You're changing their call scripts, you're changing their quotas and KPI, everything. And when you're in that mode of anxiety and you're in that place of stress, and you just flow that straight down to your sales reps, it doesn't help anything. So when you're in these moments, when you're feeling the pressure from up above, it is your responsibility as a sales leader to protect your people from how do I say it the best way? The crap that's coming from up above, right? Like, that is your one job. Protect them and let them flourish and let them try, and encourage them to try something different. Don't keep them in a box. Don't make them feel like they have to follow the status quo. Really help them think outside the box and flourish and develop.
So there's really something interesting about what you just mentioned, Wesleyne, and I'm going to use that as a bridge to get Jen's input on it. You talk about the responsibility of sales leaders of being an umbrella or a guard that protects and serves their people to achieve the goals that they are supposed to achieve. That's the role of leadership, and I think that's brilliantly put in terms of your answer. I want to have Jen kind of tie both what Nick said and Wesleyne said, or take it a different direction, and give us a sense for how reps can better execute given the circumstances that they're in dealing with in how they deal with their customers, or how leaders can better support their reps in thinking of new ways to move forward and avoid the status quo.
Yeah. So to build on what Nick and Wesleyne said, I think in many ways in the last few years, it's been all about building a sales machine, right? It's why we run an operation the way that we do. And here's your activity numbers, and you put this in, and this comes out the other side. And I think one of the things that I've always been really blessed to have in my career is the ability to think like an entrepreneur, right? To find a culture and create a culture, if you're a leader, that says, I'm going to trust that because I've hired you and because you're still here, I'm going to give you the creative freedom to do what you think you need to do to break through this mess. Because candidly, none of us have answers. Like if we had the answer, we wouldn't be on this panel. We wouldn't be in the mess that we're in. Like this is the reality. Nobody has the silver bullet answer. And so for me, one of the reasons I created the evangelist role was because last year I started saying, look, like leads were starting to dry up for us. I could sit here and point the finger at marketing all day long. I can bitch and moan, or I can figure out what is it that I might be able to do differently that can allow this outcome to look different. And so I started posting on LinkedIn. I got involved in our podcast. I got on webinars, and I realized, man, when you do that, and Wesleyne, I loved what you said earlier. It's like, if you go out and you educate people on the problem, they're naturally going to want to have more conversations with you. And so that allowed me to create this role, which completely changed my career, completely changed the commercial outcomes for our business, and was really positive. But if I had been inside of a sales machine where I was just told, Jen, shut up, put your head down and keep making those calls, we could have never had that. And so when I look at people who I think are really doing a phenomenal job right now, they're people who are going right when everybody's going left. They're using humor, they're using entertainment, they're trying new channels. Like that's what we need to create as sales leaders, is environments where people feel comfortable standing up and saying, I've got a crazy idea. Can I try it?
Great stuff, Jen. And I want to tie a couple of things back and give you an opportunity to expand on some of the things that you said. You said one of the things that you focused on was thinking like an entrepreneur, and I often reference it as you have to be the CEO of your own desk. And you also mentioned an element where you took the bull by the horns and focused on educating the marketplace and doing things out in the open. So those are great points. And I think one of the sticking points for the average rep that is out in the world is, well, how do I start? How do I even do that in a meaningful way? So what advice would you have to the average rep that is really in sync with what all four of us are talking, but don't know where to start?
So my first piece of advice was be a student of your customers, full stop. Like you will never be not served by being a student of your customers. But what I mean specifically is talk to them, observe them. You don't even need to have any customers to just Google. If I'm selling to a CIO, like Google CIO events, Google CIO podcasts, Google these things. And we now have the benefit of sitting back and watching how these people learn. And then what I would do with that is to say, what are they talking about? Where are they talking about it? What are they learning about? What are they struggling with? And then go out and try to start learning, right? Take all those perspectives. It's all free. Like we sit on this embarrassment of riches and start saying like, what is my understanding of this problem because of where I sit within a company that provides a solution, and what interesting things do I have to say about it? And the last thing I'll say on it is like, I love this time that we're in where you have people who come from education and are becoming sellers, or chemists and becoming. I've never met a chemist who became a salesperson. I'm freaking here for it. But like, we need to be open to the fact that maybe like the future generation of sales is not just the same people who have been carrying a bag the whole time since the beginning of sales, and be open to saying, let's infuse our sales teams with more people that have that subject matter expertise. And then let's take the people like me who've never had the role and give them opportunities to learn from them. So if it's client success, if it's subject matter experts, product people, like have those conversations. We all have free time on our calendar right now. There's no reason we can't use that time to learn. So that would be my advice on where to start, is just start thinking and learning like a customer and figure out where those gaps are.
Great stuff, and I appreciate you sharing that. And obviously, by Nick's reaction, he's fully on board. I think he wanted to add something to your comment, Jen. So I want to create the space for him to do that. Nick, hop in.
I love everything that Jen said. I'm here for it. Something that, I was pretty new to building my personal brand, and it's really hard when you're getting started and you don't really know much about what's going on inside of the mind of your client. So I love what you're saying about study them. Something that's easy to do is to study that in public, build in public. So ask those questions. What are the questions that are on your mind that you're really curious about that you don't have the answers to or you can't find? Ask it to the community. That's the beautiful thing about LinkedIn or about any of these social media platforms. You can ask that question in a public forum in an engaging way, and you wouldn't believe the kind of responses that you'll get back. And you sort of start a conversation. And that's where that sense of community comes in, and the information exchanges. People start having really deep conversations in the comments. That drives a lot of traction. And pretty soon you'll be known as a resource for, hey, having really good questions. And then just people reading through those comments, that adds a lot of value.
Great stuff, Nick. And I think your point about building in the open, I'm kicking myself because I can't think of the last name, but that can be done at any level of sales experience. And there's actually a really phenomenal sales rep that's in my network, and her name is Molly. And she was working on being an SDR, and she did phenomenal engagement on LinkedIn, where she was talking about, hey, this happened to me. How would you handle this situation? And I have a couple people that are within my organization, Derek Ambrose and Matt Shields, who are really good about their experiences and sharing that and building in the open and using that collective intelligence to advance further, faster. And that's really the end, the goal. How quickly can we move from point A to point B by leveraging the resources around us? So great insights by everybody so far. I want to I want to switch gears a little bit and start deconstructing why some of the things that are happening are happening. So do a root cause analysis, and shocker, I'm going to go to the chemist at the on the panel to start that process. So when we look at the situation on the ground for most reps are missing quota. Sales organizations are missing quota overall. You have a high level of churn. You have all of these problems, and you take those problems and you stack the fact that the broader buying community wants nothing to do with us. They would rather engage with a politician or a lawyer than deal with salespeople. So you take a look at all of that. Why is that happening? And what do you point to as the biggest reasons that situation exists?
So I'd love to talk about the sales leaders. I don't blame the sales reps at all. I really don't. Because at the end of the day, as a sales leader, as a business owner, as a CEO, as a person who is overseeing the sales organization, it is your ultimate responsibility to ensure that you are giving each and every person on your team the tools, the coaching, the development, the training, the everything that they need. So when their failure is your failure. You should not be going to your boss like, I've tried everything. I just don't know why we're not hitting our numbers. No, they're failing because you're failing. You're not developing them the way they need to be developed. So as a leader, that is the very first thing that you must do. As I mentioned in my intro, I was like, why are we not hitting our numbers? Why is everybody leaving? I was like, oh, it's me. I am the problem. I am the problem. It's nobody else but me. And so once I was able to take the responsibility and really tap into it to say, I have to figure out how I can lead better, that's what unlocked everyone being able to start hitting their goals and hitting their metrics. Because let's say your boss chews you out, you go chew your team out. How does that help anyone? Your boss tells you, find an extra $1 million. You go tell them to find an extra $1 million without stopping and building some strategy in. And one thing that I wanted to pop in on that last conversation, we were talking about personal branding and understanding your customers more. As a sales leader, something that you should be making your reps do every month, every quarter, however that time is win-loss reports. Not just one little sentence here and there. Make them interview people they lost deals from. Why did you go with the competitor? Why did you choose to do nothing? And the ones that they won from. And what that is going to help you see is what we're doing well and what we're not doing well. The things we need to double down on and the things we need to stop doing. But again, that falls onto the sales leader. So I say that that is the root cause of what is happening.
I don't really have a ton to argue with you about on that point. I mean, if you look at the broader trends of the sales or selling world, you talk about output or outreach. The volume of calls have gone up, the volume of emails have gone up, and you look at that being rooted in the belief that sales is a numbers game, which is an outdated way of thinking. And you look at response rates, and response rates are down. So what's the linkage when you tie those things together? So that's a great point. I want to yield the floor a little bit and let the resident Swiftie on the panel get a response in on anything on the actual question and or anything that Wesleyne said. So for those that are watching, the resident Swiftie is Jen Allen. Jen, to you in terms of root cause analysis.
I couldn't help it. Wesleyne, you did. It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. It was such an easy layup. First of all, I am here all day for this. This is on this Wesleyne's right here on my screen. Like I'm here all day for this because I'm so sick and tired of hearing people bash SDRs for doing exactly what they're trained and coached and taught to do. Like, let's stop blaming the people that are following orders that are the wrong orders. So let me just put that to side. I think when we look at the problem, the big problem here is it's risk aversion, right? If I'm a leader and I am looking at a problem and I'm thinking about, hey, we've done layoffs, we've done budget cuts, we've done all this stuff, I feel obligated to figure out a path to fix it. But if that path involves money, that puts me in the bullseye, right? So I'm now walking into my CFO's office saying, hey, I know we're cutting money, but I really want to go out and spend some. Like when we empathize with that as sellers, I think it allows us to have a different conversation. And so I think when a buyer is sitting there looking at a problem, they themselves are often the ones that are initiating solving it. They're the ones reaching out, contact me form, filling it out, right? But as they go through, what they're starting to realize is, I know that this is a better solution, but the road to better involves a lot of risk. It's time, it's money, it's political capital, it's cost, whatever it is. And so I start to walk myself back, now convincing myself that the problem maybe isn't that bad. Maybe I can wait another 6 months. And I think when we look at that and we look at how we as salespeople are often trained to go and respond to that, our motion as salespeople is to say, no, but this is better. But they already know it's better. Like we're having the wrong argument. And so that's why I go back to the conversation. We have to recognize that human behavior when risk is present is to avoid it at all costs. The only time we as humans will assume risk is if we think that risk we are assuming is less than what we're currently assuming in our current state. And so I think that's why sales leaders really have to help sellers understand there's a whole different set of psychology in motion with today's sale when you're in a really risk-averse market. And we got to teach people to have that conversation instead of here's my ROI and here's why we're better.
So I really like what you said there, Jen, about risk and risk tolerance, because it ties into a human psychology component of it. When we're looking at what typically drives most humans, it's not the pursuit of pleasure. A bigger driver is the avoidance of pain. So as a seller, if you're looking at how do you move in the world, your job is to make a decision as safe as possible. And I'm going somewhere with this, and I'm going to hand it off to Nick. When we look at mitigating risk and diminishing pain avoidance, what is the risk that we're creating if we're only dealing with one buyer in a selling process? Walk us through what your perception of that would be.
Could you repeat the question? I got the part about the mitigation of risk, but it
Sure.
seemed like a two-part question.
Yeah, they're related. So there's two things that you need to do in a selling process to win. You need to mitigate as much risk as possible, and you need to remove as much fear of pain from the process as possible. So when you take a look at those two objectives and you tie it into, well, I'm only dealing with one buyer, what is the flaw in that process? You're trying to accomplish these two things, but you're dealing with one buyer.
Yeah, well, you're getting to multi-threading there, right? Because whenever you have all of your eggs invested in one basket, you're not diversified. This is, it kind of reminds me of like an analogy. Imagine if you had the choice between two different elevators. You have one elevator with one really big cable that can help move the elevator up or down. If that one cable gets broken, the elevator is going to fall and you're going to die. You have another elevator which has many different cables, right? They're all smaller, but if one cable breaks, you've got several other cables there that are going to help pull you up. And that's diversification. And that's what we should be thinking about when we're multi-threading into a sales account. If you have just one point of contact that you're trying to sell into, if that one point of contact gets fired, if they get sick, whatever happens, now you've created a lot of additional risk for yourself. You haven't mitigated it by diversifying across multiple other decision makers or stakeholders in that company.
Great stuff, Nick. And that provides a great bridge to the next piece of the conversation. If we all agree, and we generally do, that in order for you to increase your chances at success, you need to be dealing with multiple stakeholders. That ties directly into how does an average rep overcome the status quo. And I want to build some detail around that and hand that off to Jen in terms of what should reps be doing differently to not lose out as many opportunities as the status quo. Walk us through what that process looks like.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things we probably need to do differently, but there's two big ones for me. So one is the opportunities we are choosing to target. I used to get so, allured by a sexy brand name or a big sales force or big revenue companies, right? Because man, you win them and you feel so good. But I use the analogy all the time of if I had been trying to sell Challenger to Zoom during the pandemic, that would have been a really bad choice, right? Because the extent to which they faced the demand problem was really low. And so number one, I think we as sellers need to have really good discipline about not just looking at these like demographic qualities of an opportunity and using that to dictate whether we spend time on it, but rather saying, here's the problem we solve. To what extent, high, medium, low, am I really convinced that this problem is existing in the business? Because if we can't sell ourselves on that, we sure as shit ain't going to sell our customers on it. So that's step one. And then step two is, I think, moving away from this ROI-led thing. Like, I get it. And ROI has a time and place in every sale, no doubt. But like we talked about before, there's a story I tell a lot where last year I stopped going to the gym. I was never a gym rat, but I would go 3 times a week. COVID happened and work got busy and I stopped going, right? And the whole time I'm looking at really reputable studies that say, go to the gym, you'll have less anxiety, you'll sleep better, and all these things that I was struggling with. But I still didn't go because it was easier not to go. But had I gone to the doctor and the doctor said, Jen, if you don't go to the gym, you're going to have a heart attack. All of a sudden, now I'm comparing a heart attack versus going to the gym. And what am I going to pick? I'm going to pick going to the gym all day long, right? And I think we as sellers need to keep that in mind, that we as humans respond way, way more urgently to the avoidance of risk. So how do I take my message? It doesn't matter if I'm an average performer, low performer, or high performer. How do I take that message and convey that so that that customer who I am now confident faces that problem can feel that and creates urgency for themselves instead of me forcing it upon them?
Great stuff, Jen. And I want to have Wesleyne take a stab at the answer in terms of what reps need to be doing differently to increase their chances of success in overcoming the status quo.
One of the key things is take your sales hat off and put your buyer's hat on. So when I get an email that says, oh, my company is so amazing and you should really work with me, I delete immediately. When I get an email that says, as a business owner, this is the challenge that you may be facing, I actually read the email. That doesn't mean that I'm going to talk to you. That doesn't mean that I'm taking a meeting. But when you put on your buyer's hat, you really step into what Jen said. It's like you have to step into the position of your buyer. And so a lot of times we talk about demographics and who is this person and what do they like? Like I like to say, what are the psychographics? What is that problem that your ideal client is having. And then don't just target the one person. I like talking about this internal champion, right? This is the person, they don't have money, but they have a big issue and they're going to find the money. They're going to find the person who to sign the PO. They're going to find it. Like, so stop going to the VP of HR, stop going to the VP of sales, go to the frontline sales manager, go to the HR generalist. Nobody's emailing them. Nobody cares about them. Nobody's talking to them, but they feel pain every single day. And they feel it so deeply within them and they feel like they have no power. Talk to them, address their problems, speak their language, and that's how you get past all the fluff.
Wow. There are 3 different threads that I want Nick to go ahead and tie together with what you just said, Wesleyne, and then have Nick add his own stuff to it. So I love what you said, and it brings up a lot of interesting implications. So Nick, tie it all together in terms of how reps can be behaving differently based on what Wesleyne and Jen have both said.
So many great tips here. This is like a master class. I'm just loving this. So one, with Wesleyne, I absolutely love what you said there in terms of the way that you put the customer first, but also the sequencing of who you reach out to when you're multi-threading, because everybody starts top down. Nobody starts bottom up. And bottom up can be really, really powerful. You can go find somebody that isn't getting called frequently, that doesn't get asked questions, and they're like dying to share their opinion. And so sometimes even calling like an SDR and asking them what's going on, they will spill all the beans. I love my SDRs, but they will spill all the beans, and the amount of intelligence you can get from them is really incredible, right? So that's fantastic. 2, in terms of what you were saying with, hey, putting their problem first instead of putting your solution first, that's the only way they're going to break through, because nobody cares who you are or how great your solution is. Everybody says that. But if you know their problem specifically because you've done your research, you've talked to their people, their boots on the ground, now that's very provocative. All right. Be a student of the game. Absolutely. Something else I would say I would add into this. So there's an arms race for attention, right? Everybody's doing more and more volume, more and more outbound, more and more stuff. So just being noisier is not going to help you at all. You need to do something that's really, really specific, almost like spear fishing, to get in and really put yourself apart, right? So that's where I love what Wesleyne was saying in terms of like, the sequencing and putting their problem first, because that's how you're going to break through that noise. If you just send out more emails or more phone calls or whatever, it doesn't matter. You're just going to piss people off, versus if you come in with a highly specific, highly personalized message that's very well researched, now you've got my attention.
Awesome stuff, Nick. And I want to toss it to Jen real quick before we start the key takeaways and action items that both leaders in sales need to be paying attention to shift what's happening or shift the situation that exists in sales this year into next year. And Jen, the question that I have for you is relatively simple, I think. What's the value of working bottom up, which is what Nick recommended, in terms of overcoming the status quo? How do you see that playing out?
So first of all, Nick, I love the way you said that. That was so good. For me, right, when we are trying to compel a customer to change, first we have to understand the beliefs and assumptions that sit under why they do what they do, right? So if you think of an iceberg, their behaviors are the tip of the iceberg, and why they do what they do is everything underneath it. As a salesperson, we are often ignorant to that, right? When I'm calling the C-level executive, I'm like, I don't know, you're using this CRM because you think it's the best, but I don't really know. What Nick prescribed is I can go in and I can use someone who isn't the quote unquote buyer, where it's a bit of a safer conversation. And I can say, for my example, right, we used to do this when I was at Challenger, we would call SDRs and say, what was the last time you were trained? What were you trained on? What have you done with it, right? And what I'm learning there is I'm learning current state. And that way, when I get to the C-level person, I don't have to waste their time doing boring discovery on something that I could have found from somewhere else. Instead, I'm flipping it. I'm saying, from what I understand, I could be wrong. I don't work within your business. It sounds like when I come onto the bit and I come on the team, I get training for 12 weeks. I get this, and this. But help me understand, when a customer says this, how do you equip your salespeople to respond? And all of a sudden, it's like, whoa, you know me, and this is our first time talking. So I think I'm a big proponent of what Nick prescribed, going bottom up, makes us more credible, helps us maybe even assess, is this the right opportunity to be even calling on?
There are absolutely no lies told when Nick said that this is almost like a master class between what everybody has shared with us. And I want to hand it off to Wesleyne, because I know that she's got something to bridge when it comes to the value of working bottom up. So Wesleyne, I yield the floor to you.
Yeah, I want to drop back in my passion, sales managers, sales leaders that I love talking about so much. And so the way that we kicked off this last little segment that we discussed was really thinking about what the problems the buyers are having, focusing on who they are, how you can help solve their problems. But as a sales leader, that is what's your job. Your customer are your salespeople. So it is your job, it is your responsibility to understand the problems, the challenges, where they are getting stuck. Don't look at numbers, look at conversions. What is not converting? What is not working? And work with them on the thing that they need help with, right? Like we talked about testing and variables and all of that, right? So make sure that you're focusing on your customer. Who are your salespeople? How can you serve them better? What are the problems they are having that need to be overcome?
This time I remember to take myself off of mute before I was chiming in. So pro tip. So great conversation so far. It's been a phenomenal discussion. And, I think one of the things that is worth saying is that with this panel, we could have talked about any one of the action items for a while. There is so much density when it comes to the subject matter that, connecting with these folks that are on the panel is going to serve you well in terms of the purpose of advancing your career further faster and also leveraging all of that collective intelligence. So I so appreciate all three of you carving out the time to share your insights. So I'm going to set a limit, and that limit is one critical takeaway, because we have like 508. I've counted them over here. So when you're looking at what sales leaders need to be doing differently, what sales reps need to be doing differently to change their prospects in 2023, what advice would you have? And I want to lead off with Nick first, up to bat.
I'm going to shout out to Wesleyne here, the scientific method, hypothesis, experiment, one variable at a time. That's how you do it.
That's gimmick infringement, dude. You can't be doing that. Nice stuff. So great scientific method, experiment, test, retest. Great stuff. To you, Wesleyne, what's the one takeaway that you would recommend?
So I'm going to cheat a little bit, but it's still going to be one thing. So I'm going to say that your goal as a sales leader is to get in the trenches with your team. You need to listen to their call. Like, don't just listen to their calls and write the responses. Get on the phone with them, give them live feedback, and really help them understand how they can get better. What's the one thing they can do to get better? And that goes the other way. Salespeople, ask your leadership for help. Don't just suffer in silence. Don't just sit on the phones. Don't just sit in your home office and not be moving forward when you really need some help. So that's why I said it's just a little cheating, but ask for help when you need it. Give help as you see fit.
I really love your point about asking for help. And it actually triggered something in my head that happened yesterday, where I had just come out of a meeting and there were so many different pathways that we could take the stuff that came out of the meeting. And I reached out to my director and I was like, hey, I need your read on this, because I can't figure out which is the best way to approach or which one is the best path to approach. So, breaking news, I'm a fairly senior sales professional. And if I'm asking questions, there's no reason that anybody else shouldn't be asking questions about where they're stuck or how do I solve this particular problem. Just make sure you're coming prepared with a layout of what you've done so far, so you're not having somebody else just do the work for you. So great stuff, Wesleyne and everybody else. Jen, one takeaway for you.
Yeah, so I'm going to nerd out. There was a piece of research that Challenger did that said 83% of the buying group's time is spent without the seller, right? And it's spent researching independently, researching online, talking to other people, right? It's without us. And so if there's one thing I think we as salespeople, sales organizations can be doing is figure out where your customers are going to learn, figure out a point of view on the things they're trying to learn about, and get really freaking loud about it, right? And stop just letting your sales calls be the only outlet and communication channel. Be present where your customers go to learn and have something to say that isn't our solution is the best.
Awesome stuff. And based on some of the responses or visual cues that I'm seeing, I don't think you have any disagreement with anybody on the panel as far as that goes. So last thing before we wrap up, I want to make sure that we share with everybody that's listening, and we'll catch this on demand, where people can find you. I'm going to keep it with you, Jen, and then follow up with Nick and Wesleyne. Jen, where can people find you?
Dude, I live on LinkedIn. I'm just addicted. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Jen Allen. And then every Friday, Social has a meetup at 12 Eastern. You can find me there learning how to use social, get smarter about interacting where our customers go to learn.
Yep. And stay tuned on TikTok for Jen doing TikTok dances, because that's coming up. So, Nick, where can people find you?
Similar to Jen, I live on LinkedIn. It's my favorite place. That's the best way to find me.
It seems like all the cool people are hanging out on LinkedIn. I want to be cool too. Wesleyne, where can people find you?
Same place, just Wesleyne on LinkedIn. That is my playground. If you love the way I talk, I have lots of videos where I'm telling you exactly what you're doing wrong and how to fix it.
Awesome stuff. And just a quick note for everybody that might be tuning in. We know that both Wesleyne and Jen are available for your sales kickoffs. So make sure you're reaching out to them as you're planning on how to change the game in 2023. I want to thank everybody for joining us for this great discussion. For those of you who joined us on the stream, caught us on either LinkedIn or YouTube, give us your feedback. I'd be curious to see how this show impacted you. Certainly, I would highly recommend you connecting with the panelists if you haven't already connected. The object of this exercise in this show is to help leaders, talent leaders of all sorts across all functions, move their initiatives forward and do more with less. And hopefully we've advanced that cause. Tune in next Wednesday for the season 1 finale of Talent Strategy 60, where we'll have another great panel discussion. In terms of where you can find me, I am also on LinkedIn with all the other cool people, but you can find me on TikTok. You can find me on YouTube. I'm not on Instagram because that's for food pics, but I also have a podcast, Cascading Leadership. So tune in there, where we have a lot of leadership conversations. Obviously, if you're struggling with any sort of talent strategy issue, reach out to me directly, and we can certainly troubleshoot how best we can help you solve those problems. And obviously, if you're trying to advance your DEI initiatives, Circa is a great organization to help you move that forward as well. Thanks for joining us on Talent Strategy 60, and I am looking forward to seeing you again next time. Appreciate all the panelists, and tune in next time for another great show.